The great failed romances of the 20th century. First you start laughing, then you cry. The great failed romances of the 20th century. Love may be a sham, but we still gotta try.
Welcome to the Great Failed Romances of the 20th Century. I'm singer-songwriter and historian Teddy Gray.
And I was runner-up to play Luke on Modern Family, Sam Kaufman. Still hurts. So Teddy, which romantic rascals will we be reminiscing about today?
Today we'll be discussing one of the most famous Hollywood couples of all time.
Dick Dastardly and Muttley?
Well, you were right with the Dick part. It's Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor.
Old tricky Dick himself. You know, I heard through the grapevine that I made it onto his enemies list.
Both Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor were well on their way to being legends independently when they first met in 1953, with Taylor having been a seasoned movie star since the age of 21, and Richard Burton accruing a reputation for being one of the finest actors of his generation. He first spotted Liz at a Hollywood party thrown by Gene Simmons, and when recalling his first time seeing her, remembered her as being so beautiful that he nearly laughed out loud.
Liz, conversely, found Burton to be swaggering and vulgar and ignored him. The two would not meet again for another 9 years, until it was announced that Burton would be playing Taylor's co-star in the film Cleopatra. She was hesitant to engage with Richard at first, but quickly warmed up to him, and within hours the two had struck up a playful relationship.
Being smitten with distraction, Elizabeth recalled blowing numerous lines on set.
And that's not all she blew on set.
And when the time came for the two of them to film their first on-screen kiss, the director recalled each take growing longer and more passionate, to the point where he finally said, "Would you two mind if I said cut?"
Despite both Burton and Taylor being married at the time, their red-hot romance ensured that no obstacle would keep them from each other, their spouses least of all. Elizabeth Taylor was married to Eddie Fisher at the time, and he once called home only for Richard Burton to answer the phone. After asking him what he was doing in his house, Burton responded by saying, "I'm fucking your wife."
What? That's not a joke. It happened, I swear. And then who should join in on the fun but Albert Einstein himself? The famous physicist was known for getting pretty physical himself, and he had an equation for Liz and Dick to work on. And, okay, fine, this part I did right.
Hot on the heels of a hit movie and loads of publicity, Liz and Dick holed up in a rented villa in Italy to enjoy each other's company. For each moment of intimacy, there were 2 moments of public spectacle, with the paparazzi following them everywhere they went, a trend that would continue for the rest of their lives. It's easy to say that the two had a love-hate relationship with the press. When Laurence Olivier asked Burton whether he would like to be a great actor or a household name, Burton famously responded with, "Both."
Pretty cool, huh? Of course, what the story does leave out is the fact that it took Burton 16 minutes to come up with this response, pissing his pants and covered in flop sweat the whole time. But as they say, history isn't written by the sweaters.
In early 1964, only days after Taylor's divorce had been finalized, she and Richard were married, for the first time, in what was referred to as the wedding of the century.
By them.
Being too notorious for the typical Hollywood crowd, the couple spent a fair amount of their marriage socializing with the European jet-setters and various aristocrats around the world. Some of Taylor's good friends were Princess Grace of Monaco and the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. And while this sort of community suited her perfectly fine, Burton found himself being bored much of the time.
While they surrounded themselves with sophisticated people, their behavior together in public was often anything but. The two quickly became famous for their public spats, which entertained and horrified those around them. Richard loses his temper with true enjoyment. "It's beautiful to watch," Taylor once said. "Our fights are delightful screaming matches, and Richard is rather like a small atom bomb going off."
Richard elaborated, saying, "We live out, for the benefit of the mob, the sort of idiocies they've come to expect. We will often pitch a battle purely for the exercise. I will accuse her of being ugly, she will accuse me of being a talentless son of a bitch, and this sort of frightens people. I love arguing with Elizabeth, except for when she is in the nude."
It's hard to think of good comebacks when you're mesmerized by someone's bazungas. Hunka hunka. That's what they're called, right? Back me up here, yeah?
The two's fights were starting to rival the notoriety of the films they made together during their first marriage, which included The Taming of the Shrew and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, both adaptations that played off of the couple's real-life reputations.
Despite their intense love for each other, the marriage was beginning to take a toll on the two stars. The fights were turning nastier and more vicious, and the two began to grow more jealous over each other's little flirtations and side flings. To top it all off, Burton's alcoholism, as well as Taylor's addiction to pills, was making the union grow toxic for both parties. Once Burton had an affair with actress Natalie Delaune, it was the first final straw, and the two divorced in 1974.
The two were both emotionally exhausted. Taylor was quoted as saying, "I gave everything away. I don't want to be that much in love ever again." But while the two were emotionally spent, they were far from done loving each other, and found that while they could not live with each other, living without was an even more difficult task to stomach.
And it was only the following year that the two secretly remarried. A letter from that time frame showcases Taylor's excitement, and she wrote to Richard, "You really are my husband again, and I have news for thee. There will be no more marriages or divorces either. Your wife, Elizabeth."
Needless to say, the two divorced for a second time less than a year after the ceremony.
Wow, way to call your shot, Liz. We got a real Babe Ruth over here. He played football, right?
Despite falling out yet again, the two remained close friends from that point on, and always spoke highly of each other. They wrote each other romantic letters frequently, and it was clear that the two found it difficult to be apart, even after yet another failed marriage.
Artistically, the two would reunite a final time for a production of Noel Coward's Private Lives in 1983. While audiences loved both the production and seeing the twice-married couple play into their public image, the production was panned by critics. And as the run went on, Elizabeth would show up to performances drunk, frequently forgetting lines. This enraged Richard, who shortly after married his assistant, Sally Hay. In turn, Taylor was soon after engaged to lawyer Victor Luna.
Sadly, just a year later, Richard Burton passed away of a brain hemorrhage at the age of 58. Just days before his death, Burton had written his final letter to the love of his life, and it arrived at her house shortly after she attended his memorial. Of all the letters the two wrote back and forth, this was the only one that Elizabeth chose never to share with anyone else.
However, we here at The Great Failed Romances of the 20th Century have a rare exclusive. I have obtained a copy of said letter. Oh boy, let's see what juicy secrets Richard spilled. And it begins. 2 dozen eggs, 3 cartons of milk, 2 boxes of Hostess cakes, 4 midnight snackies. Wow, I can see why she wanted to keep this one to herself.
A shopping list, you idiot.
You say midnight snackies? Yeah, that's right. Who's in the hot seat now, Teddy?
Elizabeth and Richard loved each other until the very end, albeit in a very messy yet spectacular way. Elizabeth Taylor later revealed in an interview before her death that she always believed that they would have been married for a third and final time. "From those first moments in Rome, we were always madly and powerfully in love," she said. "We had more time, but not enough."
Aww. What? So Teddy, why don't you give us all a midday snacky and tell us all about the song?
Oh, wipe that shit-eating grin off your face, Kaufman, before I do it for you. This song is called Love and Hate, and it captures an intimate moment between Elizabeth and Richard later in their lives.
Set somewhere around 1983, this song finds the couple reuniting for the run of Private Lives, and again finding themselves in each other's arms. While spending a drunken night together, the two have some laughs, some arguments, and eventually find themselves singing a duet with one another, listing what they adore and despise about each other, while freely admitting that the hold they have on one another is too strong for either of them to ever wriggle their way out of it. It's a rare private moment between a couple that lives so much of their lives in the public, for all to gawk at and envy.
Aw, I'd like a romance like that someday.
Yeah, maybe when you get a different face.
What?
Looks like you're back in the hot seat now, huh? How does it feel?
How does it feel?
Yeah, that's right. Take it all, bitch. Maybe now you'll know your place.
Is this still the script?
The king is back, baby, and we'll be back next week. Enjoy Love and Hate.
Let's play a new game, dear, it's called Love and Hate. One sobers you up, and one intoxicates. We've soldiered through both often in the same day. Shall I start it off or should you? Take me to heaven, fall under my spell. Soon you'll wake up again, then back to hell. I'm damned to be yours and you're doomed to be mine, so let's just get remarried and divorced one more time. Well, this was once love, but it curdled to hate, then back into love. How can that be explained? And if down the road it turns back into hate, we'll know enough to see it through. Oh, what a way to have spent all these years. Romance and ecstasy, heartbreak and tears. And I could have gone down as one of the greats. Instead I'm consumed by our love and our hate. Well, what's it tonight, dear? Is it love or hate? Shall we dine on fine china or break every plate? I'll come for the love and I'll stay for the hate, as long as you feel it too. I hate your temper, but I love our fights. I love when you're wrong and I hate when you're right. I hate every slap and each smack to the jaw, but I love how we're stared at with judgment and awe. I hate all your lectures, I hate our goodbyes, but I love your wittiness, love your sad eyes. I hate your new girlfriend, well now you're wise. I hate to say you're the great love of my life. Put us in the madhouse and lock all the gates. As long as I'm with you, I'm surely insane, till we see the difference between love and hate, and I don't see it happening soon. Though I may deny it's true, I know that I'd die without you. The great failed romances of the 20th century. First you start laughing, then you cry. The great failed romances of the 20th century. Love may be a sham, but we still gotta try.